You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. thechrisvossshow.com, as said by the opera singer we hired last week. That's new on the show, folks, because that's what we do. We bring stuff to the new show and all the newest, smartest minds. For 15 years, we've been bringing you the billionaires, the CEOs, the astronauts, the White House advisors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, everybody in the world to expand your mind, tell you their stories, help you with your journey from what they learned from their journey. Stories are the great owner's manual to life. I need to make a shirt that says that, because that's the beauty of collecting stories. I was having lunch celebrating my nephew's birthday. I think he turns 23. And I told him there's three key things to look for in life. Number one, the things you know. Number two, the things you don't know, but you don't know them. And number three, the most important, is the things you don't know. And learning about those things is really important in life, because usually those are things that come at you. Or if you want to really master life and understand a lot of stuff in life and have some breadth to your knowledge base and not live in a Dunning-Kruger sort of world, master the things you don't know. And of course, that's pretty infinite when it comes to the universe. But the more you can learn, the more you know. It sounds like a PSA commercial from TV. Should be that. The more you know. Anyway, so we're here to educate you and bring you more that you can know today. Not today only, but always. The show is putting out 3 to 4 shows a weekday, and we're putting out 15 to 20 shows a week. So please keep up and refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. As always, we beg of you. Give us 5-star reviews on iTunes. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and the TikTok at Chris Voss 1. We have an amazing young lady on the show today. She is Helen Morris. She's an energy healing practitioner and podcast host, and she's going to be on to tell us her amazing, heartfelt story of grief, loss of a child, finding joy and happiness afterwards, etc., etc. She's a certified emotion coach and body coach based out of New Zealand. She came across her healing modality after tragically losing her 18-year-old daughter and only child in a motor vehicle accident in 2017. Prior to this, she worked in the health sector in health intelligence, supporting general practices in Hawke's Bay with national health initiatives and programs. From 2019 to 2009 to 2013, she developed and coordinated an award-winning before-school check screening program for 4-year-olds, which she also supported at a national level and contributed 2 publications evaluating the program. In 2012, she was nominated for a leadership award for contributions locally and nationally to the program. Welcome to the show, Helen. How are you?
I am doing great, and it's great to be here with you, Chris, and your listeners today.
There you go. Great to have you as well. All the way from New Zealand, that beautiful place where it has all the scenic sort of panoramas.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah, it's a beautiful place to live.
There you go. So give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
So basically, if they just Google the beautiful side of grief, then that's going to give them all the links to everything. I've just recently just changed everything over to that just to make it a little bit easier.
There you go. Easy to remember. The beautiful side of grief.com, correct?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And so give us a 30,000 overview of your experience there and what led you down this road.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's just go back a little bit. So, I was always a highly sensitive child growing up, except I didn't know that. And I was in a family that I felt like I never, ever fitted into. And so as I grew up, I sort of was very spiritual, and I was always sort of interested in that. And so I became a sort of workaholic, but in my early 20s, I had chronic illnesses. I already had severe Crohn's disease and chronic fatigue. Yeah, I know. And that was from just living like a hugely stressful life. I lived in fight or flight my whole entire life. And, I'd sort of been emotionally abused, sexually abused. So there was loads that happened to me, in all of those years. But then I had my beautiful girl when I was 35, so I was an older mum, and I was always a little bit worried about that. But she just burst into my life unexpectedly and just took me on this adventure, really. So she taught me through things like, at 18 months old, she developed night terrors, and she had those until she was 7.5. And honestly, I don't even know how I survived those years. And at 3 years old, she also got Guillain-Barré and became paralyzed. And so we went through, getting her to learn to walk again and that. So, but she was this amazing athlete as well. So it didn't matter what she put her hand to, she was just amazing at it. Her go-to was hockey. So she was in rep teams from the age of 10 right through a teen. So I had this incredible child who was just, sassy, beautiful, exceptional on all levels. And we were just so close because it was just her and I from the age of 1. And then at 18, of course, as you mentioned, she was in a car accident. So, that changed my life again, forever. Yeah.
And did she pass away in the car accident? Was it instant?
Yeah, it was instant. And it's a bit of an interesting story because we were just about to move house and, the following weekend of her accident. But for some reason, I changed my mind and decided, no, we were shifting a week earlier. So we just shifted into this new home, and she was really excited because she could finally have a cat. And so she just phoned me 2 minutes actually before the accident, though I didn't know that at the time. And she's just said, oh no, I phoned her actually, because I thought she was at home, and she was actually in a town close to us. And she said, no, I'm just leaving Napier. I'll meet you at home for dinner. And then she had to go off to work, you see. And she said, oh, go check out my room. It looks amazing. And then I said, probably, okay, darling, see you soon. Love you lots, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then 2 minutes later, she was dead. And probably about half an hour, I got this horrible feeling come over me. And I just knew something had happened. Wow. And and it was like she came to me, and I just wanted to go to her, but I didn't know which way she was coming home. So I phoned her best friend, who I knew had the location of Tal's phone. And she didn't pick up. So it went to answer phone, and I cried, and I didn't know why I was crying. And then I phoned the police, which was so unusual for me to do. But I phoned the police, and, and then while I was speaking to them, her friend, texted me the location of her phone. And so when I said to the police, it's in Farndon Road, can you just tell me if there's any accidents? And they just said, oh, put me on hold. And I just knew. Wow. And then they came back on and they said, yes, we can confirm there's an accident there. And but we've closed the road off, so you just wait at home and we'll update you. And I thought, like bloody hell. And so I phoned the hospital because I knew if an ambulance had been dispatched, then, that's where it would be going. And they chirpily told me, no, we're not expecting anything. So I Googled. And this was all within an hour of her accident. And it was already up on Google. And it just said, the headline was, a fatality between a truck and a car in Farndon Road. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know who the fatality is. And so a few minutes later, the police arrived and confirmed my worst nightmare.
That's unfortunate. I'm sorry. So what are the stages you go through after that? Because there's grief and all that issues that go on.
So I totally threw those I didn't go through those typical stages of
Oh,
grief,
wow.
but yeah, because they haven't things like anger, denial.
Mm-hmm.
But, right from the get-go, I was very accepting that my child had died and
Mm-hmm.
that she was never coming back to me. But then I think I also had that experience, that knowing, like I said, I was very spiritual. So that tied into a couple of things. Like I used to always have this really unusual reaction to teenagers having car accidents. And I used to think to myself, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly imagine how the parents must cope with that. Yet here I was in that exact same situation. And it was kind of like a ding ding moment. Like it was almost like I was being prepared for her passing.
Hmm.
And yeah, I know it's bizarre. So I didn't, go through that denial stage, and I didn't go through anger either. I loved this beautiful girl so, so much, and I never asked why it had happened. It's almost like I knew that on some higher level that we'd signed up to it. That,
Huh.
yeah, yeah, like a soul contract. That was part of why I was here. And I'd signed up to losing a beautiful teenager at 18. And if I'd signed up to that, she had signed up to that also. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a knowing on that level, except that became clearer to me in the years afterward. And so, yeah, so I just did not, even when I went into dark moments, because don't get me wrong, I grieved, I cried. This was the worst possible thing
Okay.
imaginable. But I would do that quickly. And then I felt like I was suddenly pulled out of it. And I would go to, like, I had this clairvoyance guy who was also a medium, and I know him very well. I'd been to some of his shows and I had his books, and I would just go to this one book, Soul Journeys, and I would just flick open a page, and it was like it gave me enough information just to lift me back up and get me back on track. And within weeks of her dying, I was back at work, and I was working, training people, training doctors and GP practices, and I had to be on my game.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it just seemed like I just seemed to be able to cope with all of that.
Huh.
I
Now,
know.
you had a death again with someone you were recently seeing, I
Yeah.
think, when we talked about in the green room.
Oh
And
my
then
God. Yeah.
you'd mentioned that you had cried a lot and processed that,
Mm.
and maybe some of that process was from your daughter,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
okay, tell us about that, because I think that's important for people to understand. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we
So,
package away grief
mm.
and we experience it later because we don't reconcile things. So I'm curious about that.
100%. So, because Tal was a teen and she had these beautiful friends, and I think a lot of the time I was focused on supporting her friends, making it okay for them, because for, probably many of them, this was their first experience with death. And it was the death of somebody their own age. And so I felt this real need to protect them, to help them, to be there for them. So I think I put a lot of my own grief, yeah, like I said, like you said, I dampened it down, and then I had been on my own for like 20 plus years, just Tal and I. And so I hadn't been in a relationship. And so when I got into this relationship, I'd done a lot of work to make sure that it was the type of relationship I really wanted in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so it was easy. It was so easy. It was like once we got talking, it was a guy I met through work, and we kept it pretty quiet from work until we knew where it was heading.
Mm-hmm.
But we just had this instant connection. It was so easy. It was easy on all levels. And I was just so happy that I'd finally met somebody I thought I was going to spend many, many enjoyable times with. But then early into it, really, it was just a month and a bit of knowing this guy who I felt like I'd known forever. He went on a camping trip, and unfortunately, he was murdered on the first night by a 16-year-old in this
Holy crap.
in this beautiful, tranquil place that nobody had ever thought anything like that would happen. And so then, and of course, my workplace didn't know that he and I were, seeing each other. And so they told me, oh, like, Helen, we want to give you the sad news about a work colleague. And I went, oh my God.
Wow.
But you see, I knew something had happened on the day he died as well. And because it was such a remote area, there was a very sketchy cell phone coverage. So I wasn't expecting him to contact me until the Monday. It happened on the Saturday. And then the Monday came and went. I went, ooh. And then on the Wednesday, it all just made sense to me.
Wow.
And then I cried. I just cried. I cried for everything. I cried because I thought life was cruel. Like, how could I have gone through everything with my daughter, everything in my life, healing myself from chronic illnesses, getting my life on track, living the life that I really wanted to be living, and then have this happen. And I just thought that was so frigging unfair. So I was feeling, having a bit of a pity party. But I was also crying for the loss of Tal and for the loss of this beautiful guy that I'd met. He was beautiful. He used to just make everybody's lives richer. He just had this way about them that, he would cheer everybody up. And so yes, that was a great release for me. And then I realized that, I was crying for my girl as much as I was crying for Adrian.
Do you feel like you'd put off getting closure and you got closure at that moment, or did you feel you're fine with both things?
Yeah, I think I was fine with both because I'd done so much work, so much healing around Tal. I think she was very instrumental in guiding me from the point she died through the next stages of my life. So she guided me to the energy healing, to the emotion code and the body code. And I actually even went over to the States and met the developer of the program. And because I just wanted to know that it was kosher, this energy healing was a bit woo-woo, and and I really wanted to know that, I was getting into something legit, and truly was, because I just did healings not only on myself, but on loads of other people. But the transformation for myself came when I taught myself to muscle test, and then I used the emotion code to just release so many emotions I had trapped my entire lifetime. So it was those emotions of anger and resentment and bitterness and jealousy and all those things I just didn't face in my lifetime up till that point. I was so intent on being this perfectionist and getting on with life and proving that I was worthy, that I just never allowed myself to really sink down and feel all the things that I had experienced. And they were like so many just unimaginable things. And so this was a great release. Yeah. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to feel calm and at peace and in control and strong. And so that was an amazing feeling. And I wanted to give that to others. Yeah.
Wow. So let's get into it. What is the emotion code and the body code that you use to help other people?
Well, it's this amazing healing modality. And so like every emotion has a frequency. And so we're able to identify them, at that frequency within the body. And I believe that people, because we're so conditioned that we should be this and we should be that, and then we you add all those expectations that we should have the house, the car, the job, everything else on top of that ourselves, that we just attract and trap a lot of emotions if we don't allow ourselves to feel them and process them properly. So the emotion code is simply going through and using muscle testing, and everybody can muscle test. Everybody can teach themselves to muscle test. And basically what you're doing is you're asking yourself, to release the emotions you have around, say, grief or work. Maybe you're going through some tough times at work or whatever it is. And then it just guides you to the rows that those emotions exist in, and then the columns, and one by one you can just narrow it down and release those emotions within you. And you can often feel that physical release, like your yawn, or your just feel like, an energetic release, or, you'll just feel tired for the next day or two. And that's your body just releasing all this heaviness and this lower level frequencies from your body. And you can just do that over and over, because often our emotions and our experience layer themselves in our bodies and cause dis-ease, which if we leave them there too long, create disease. And so as we release them from our body, we can also release diseases. So for me, I mentioned earlier that I had severe Crohn's disease, and I was in and out of hospital multiple times. It had got to the stage where the surgeon didn't even want to go near me because it was through so much of my small intestine. And I released all of the emotions that had trapped themselves in my digestive tract. So people have a go-to, like some people it's their lungs, some people it's their heart, for me it was my solar plexus, all my digestive tract. That's where I trapped a lot of emotion. And so as I released these, I suddenly didn't have Crohn's disease anymore, and that had affected me on such a severe level for years and years and years. So with the body code, that's the next level. So that was the magic. That's where the magic happened, because not only did it go into emotions, but it narrowed it down to all the body systems and the energetic systems, like your chakra systems and your meridians and any organs, and and anything else like EMF that you may have been exposed to, or toxins. So you could just release. Yeah. So anybody has this ability to do that. And I then worked on a lot of people and had some incredible, amazing experiences that you can't justify other than something at a greater level than us. And I'll give you a quick example. So early on, after as I was doing my body code certification, you have to work on, a number of people to become certified and do a load of sessions on them. And so I had this young guy come to me, and, a friend had recommended him to me, and she said, "Can you please help him?" And so she came too, so we were both happy with that. And I explained to him, what I was going to do. And so she was sitting there, and I could see her eyes and her reactions as I was saying, this happened to you at such and such an age, and you were feeling these emotions, and I feel it has to do with blah, 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 blah. And I was releasing them. And then afterwards, she said to me, "How on earth did you do that? You didn't even know this young guy, and you picked up that at 13 years old, something traumatic had happened to him, in regards to the church and his parents, and that it had affected his whole confidence going forward. And he was an amazing musician." And she said, she said, "You were on point with every single thing. How did you know that?" And I said, "I don't know, but we have this intuition." And that's why I put in front of it that I'm very intuitive, because all my life I've been like that. I just know.
Probably know and are easy to identify with that because you've known other people with traumas. And it's kind of interesting how some people with traumas recognize other people, or sometimes have attraction to other people with traumas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in relationships, that's exactly, you know what? You attract the person that you're meant to be with in relationships as to where you are, because
Yes.
it's all about that attraction. And often we attract people that we need to learn from and grow from. And, that's why relationships don't often work, in those early stages until you get to a level where, you know yourself and you've grown a lot. And yeah.
That's true. I think that's very true. Looking back on my past, I can see, my mother said to me one time, she's, how come you date all these messed up girls? And turns out I was pretty messed up inside myself. And a lot of
Yeah.
it was me and what I was
Me too.
attracting or what I was attracted to. And I think, we're attracted to people who are similar to us, and maybe it's some way to reconcile. We're trying to reconcile our trauma. I heard somebody say once, I don't know if it's true, but I heard I think it was a psychologist though, but they said that when we grow up, we mirror our parents' relationship that they teach us. Whatever the relationship is
Mm,
between the mother and the father,
mm,
and then we try and replicate that in our future relationships and resolve the issues they had. We try to perfect what we saw, and the failures that we
yeah.
saw in those relationships, we try
Yeah.
and recreate them and then try and overcome them. But the problem is many of the times the basics for why those relationships failed was because there were people that shouldn't have been together in the first place. And so you end up, it's like recreating a failed formula of chemistry, and you're just going to keep failing. So talk to us about what you do on your website. You do sessions and coaching, I believe, with people. Tell us what
Yeah.
that work entails, and how that goes into.
I guess my whole grief process with Tal is really put me into a service mentality. All I want to do now is, help people. I want to
Mhm.
help people through their trauma. And I guess having gone through so much myself, it's like you say, I can easily relate to people so they feel safe and they trust.
Mhm.
Because when you're dealing with energy healing, a lot of people think, oh, that is so woo woo. And I heal people across the other side of the world. So I don't do this face to face very often. I do it mostly with, clients across the other side of the world.
Mhm.
And that in itself is like, how does that happen? But I have these people coming back to me again and again and again because, they start off, they're in a crisis. Usually it's a crisis that brings somebody to me.
Mhm.
And so what I do is just release the emotion and the energies that are related to that crisis so they can think again, so that their system can function again. And we talk a lot about the vagus nerve and the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, fight or flight. And
Mhm.
so what we want to do is get people back to where they can think again. And these sessions, are very gentle. I only ever allow as much emotion to be released as what their body can handle. And I know that. I just intuitively know when to stop. And it's very much guided by them as well, because they're feeding back to me whether we're on track and things like that, or if they need to know more information. And then, I usually give it a week between sessions, and then they come back for more. So normally I would say that we can do a pretty good job in, 4 or 5 sessions if somebody has a lot of trauma. And I have some people that just want to have better relationships with, maybe a stepchild or something like that. So they come to me again and say, help me with this child, like I'm not. So, so we just clear, what the barriers may be to that. And it works on everything and anything basically. And yeah, but it's just what I love about it is that it's look, there is a place for our medical system,
Mhm.
100%.
Mhm.
But then we also have a lot of effects that are from multi-medications. And, for me, when I was going through Crohn's, I actually went to natural healing after a while because I just felt like I was a guinea pig for medications. They just tried me on one thing that didn't work. Then I was put on another, and on it went. And I know so many people go through that and they lose hope. And they think that this is the way they have to be forever. Well, I just want to tell people it doesn't matter what you've got. You don't have to have that forever. There are modalities out there like the emotion code and body code that can really help you with that. And I think what it does and how it works is that it is dealing with those generational traumas and all those self-belief systems that we may not be aligned to, but we have in our genes and the outing. And, so that's why I did a lot of work prior to this last relationship, because I looked at, what I wanted in somebody. And then I looked at, well, actually, am I that person?
Ah.
Because if you're not that person, you have to do work around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting to me how emotion in the body and depression, how we feel, equates to our health. We talked in the green room about one of my big bands that I love, Rush. Years ago, I think it was 2005. Neil Peart, the drummer, his wife of 20 years or something like that. Their daughter was going off to college, so probably about the same age as your daughter. And it was their only daughter, their only child. And she went off to college and rolled her car in a ravine on the freeway in the snow in Canada and passed away. And the wife took it so hard that she just went into a total state of depression, really darkness. And I just want to tell the story because it gives you two different ways of which you can approach a tremendously traumatic event like this. And so he tried everything he could to get her out of her state, even moving her to Europe to try and brighten her mood. But within 6 months, because she was depressed and really didn't want to live, and she developed cancer, and she was gone within, I think it was 9 months to a year. Like it was, she developed this aggressive cancer that basically killed her. And he kind of accepted the fact that she just missed her daughter so much. She didn't, it was just too much. And so how you deal with emotions and, what you're talking about, your emotion code, et cetera, can make a difference in life or death. And as you've talked about, maybe Crohn's disease and some of the other things that are happening, it can make all the difference in the world. And it can, people don't realize how much it translates into sickness, death, and everything else. So it's wild.
I think there's another big thing that plays into all of this, because like I mentioned earlier, I've been through so much in my life, and I think it comes down to resilience. And, the difference perhaps between her and I and our experiences is that my whole life had been tough, and I had to keep picking myself up, dusting myself off, and carrying on. And so I'm very resilient. And if you look at people like Hugh van Cuylenburg and his book, The Resilience Project, and people like Edie Iger, who went through the Holocaust, or we've got a New Zealander, Lucy Hone, who's did a TED Talk on resilience and the top 3 things, and that's had over 5 million views.
Oh, wow.
Because it talks about, the qualities of that resilient people have. And I think that plays a huge factor into how we cope with adversity. And, I think the 3 things are that, she talks to, it's just this understanding that shit happens in life, whether you're a good person, bad person, or whatever type of person, it's part of life. We don't get to choose, and it's going to happen to us regardless. And I think the Second thing she mentioned is that it's where you put your attention, that's what you focus on. And I mentioned that, I got pulled out and I was focusing on positive things and gratitude. Like, I was incredibly grateful for the 18 years that I did have my daughter,
Wow.
and for everything that she taught me during those years and the great time she gave me. And she had the most magical smile. And I would just look at photos of her and see that smile and hear her just talking to me. And I just was so grateful for that. Gratitude is a biggie. Just telling yourself every single day things you're grateful for. And the third thing that Lucy talked about was, is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? And if you ask yourself that question, it all comes from within. It's not external.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have the control within. Yeah.
There you go. And maybe you've really hit it on the nose there. There's two types of, one of the things you talk about is how people handle their grief and pivoting with it. And in one case, someone saw it as a loss that couldn't be replaced. Someone saw it as something that was completely over, where you saw it as a continuum, maybe with your gratitude and appreciating the time that you had and the value that you had. I went through that with when my dog went through about 1.5 years of hospice care for cancer and then passed away. The grief was really overwhelming. And I went through the stages of grief and closure. But now when I look back on a lot of it, and I think at the time maybe I had this because we were in a state with hospice care where every day was, you just try and get through every day, and every day was a brick of gold. And you just, okay, we just need to get through today. Let's see if we can get through today. And then it was the next day. And so there may have been some gratitude that I was just thankful that I was getting the time that I had with her. But now when I look back, I can look back on it and just be grateful. And I realize that, how life works and the universe works is not fair. That's the way it is. It's a survival game, really, when it comes down to it. And there are people that are going to come in and out of your life. And life is a series of lows and goodbyes. Sometimes it's going to be you, but then you'll never really have to deal with it. But the survivors will. But for the most part, dogs live on an average of 10, 12, 16 years, if you're lucky. And that's part of the gig. I used to have people tell me, why would you get a new dog after your dog passed away? And you kind of learn to appreciate this and celebrate life and the value of it. But you also realize that this is part of the gig. You're buying a 10 to 16 year gig, and you're going to celebrate life during that time. But that's the beauty of the renewal of life. That's why we love life so much, is, it renews. It doesn't, if everyone died off and slowly died off and that was it would be pretty depressing. But life springs anew, and that's kind of the beauty and the hope. I think that you have to find the hope and the gratitude, maybe.
Yes, hope. You've got to have hope. If you don't have hope, you don't see any light, you don't see any future. And it may only just be a glimmer of hope, but, animals are incredibly healing. They are just magical. They just give you this unconditional love, and it just can change your life in ways that other humans can't, because they're not actually judging us, and we find that in life we get judged a lot. So there's that to it. And then the other thing is what is the purpose of us being here? What is that? And so I think when you go through adversity, I see that all as opportunities to grow from. Now, I didn't know this early in my life, and I used to struggle, and I used to think, why is life doing this to me? I try to be a good person and do all the right things, and I just keep getting hammered. And then when I understood, actually, what have you got to learn from this experience? Yeah, it sucks, but what's the learning from this? And then you find that suddenly you're moving into a space where you're not going through crisis after crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just kind of think that, sometimes it's about looking at it from a different lens, a different viewpoint.
Yeah. Perspective is everything. So how can people book a session with you? How can they reach out to you, see if working with you is a good fit, et cetera, et cetera?
Definitely. So anybody is most welcome just to message me on the beautiful side of grief at gmail.com, or they can find out a little bit more through my website, which is the beautiful side of grief, https:// the beautiful side of grief.com. And then you'll see my podcast. But then if you just scroll along, you also see a tab for Healing to Be You. And that's where it gives the information on the emotion code and the body code. You can have a read and see if it works for you. And, I offer these sessions at, you'll see, at ridiculous rates, because I feel it's part of my destiny just to be helping people, out of really, really tough times. And I work on the belief that people, when they need to find me, will find me. So, yeah, definitely go and check that out. And, anything, any way you can contact me, just do it. And I'm really happy just to connect with you, have a chat. You can see what I'm like, see if I'm a fit for you, and we can go from there.
There you go. So you also have a podcast that you discuss these things with and have guests on. Give us a plug-in for that.
So again, that's the beautiful side of grief.com. That's my podcast. And the reason that developed was because I wanted to show people that it doesn't matter what you go through, any form of grief, I interview people who have been through unimaginable things and who have come out the other side, and they use all different tools and ways to do that. But I want you to know that, there is a beautiful side to your grief. And if you're willing to find that, you can do so. And so I'm up to episode, I just released, in fact, this week, so we're Tuesday and Thursday, I just released my 100th episode. So,
congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
That is really spectacular, because most podcasts do not make it past episode 20 or so.
I've heard that.
The figures are staggering. So, I mean, just getting to 100, congratulations. I mean, that's, I'm so happy when I hear podcasters doing well that stick into it, because it can be hard. It is hard. I do everything. I don't have anybody who helps me out. So, there you go.
And then I was you're working full time as well. So trying to fit that in, but it's now I've moved and I'm focusing more back on the beautiful side of grief. And I'm also going to, set up a subscription portal where people can access more information. And I've got a book in the pipeline as well. So this is a, exciting few months ahead of me where I'm really working on a lot of stuff.
There you go. Yeah. Well, Helen, it's been wonderful, insightful, and thank you for sharing your story on the show. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
Okay, it's https / the beautiful side of grief.com.
The beautiful side of grief.com.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. Thanks to my audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com / Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com / Chris Voss, YouTube.com / Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1 at TikTok. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.